son of late martial arts star Bruce Lee has died. 27-year-old Brandon Lee was killed during a movie set.
Brandon Lee was young, immensely talented, and finally stepping out from the monumental shadow of his legendary father, Bruce Lee. He was on the brink of carving his own legacy, a rising star in Hollywood whose charisma and skill had already begun to attract a devoted following. Yet just days before he was to wrap his breakthrough role as Eric Draven in The Crow, the unthinkable happened. Brandon was fatally shot on set, and what should have been a routine day of filmmaking spiraled into chaos, disbelief, and a tragedy that would echo through Hollywood history. Questions swirled immediately. How could a real bullet end up in a prop gun? Who had failed to inspect the weapon? Why were so many established safety protocols ignored? And what of the dark whispers surrounding the set, a supposed curse that had haunted the production from the very beginning? These questions would linger for decades, as conspiracy theories and speculation refused to die, fueling a narrative of horror, carelessness, and grim coincidence. The fatal scene was, on the surface, simple and ordinary, a scene designed to be one of many in a film already steeped in violence, darkness, and stylized vengeance. Brandon's character, Eric Draven, was to burst through a doorway, arms full of groceries, only to be ambushed by a group of thugs. One of the assailants, played by Michael Massey, would raise his revolver and fire. Brandon's character would collapse, dramatic and lifeless, as the scene required. It had been meticulously choreographed, rehearsed, and considered low risk by Hollywood standards. Nothing about it suggested imminent danger. Yet when the cameras rolled that fateful night, everything unraveled in an instant. The scene began. As planned, Massey raised the revolver and pulled the trigger. The loud report echoed through the room, and for a fleeting moment, nothing seemed amiss. Crew members, accustomed to the cacophony of gunfire on set, initially mistook it for another routine blank. Brandon fell in perfect dramatic form. Massey remained in character, and the director called cut. Applause followed. For a few brief seconds, it seemed the take was perfect. Then reality pierced the illusion. Brandon did not move. A tense silence settled over the room. At first, some thought he was simply holding the performance, waiting for a second cue. When someone called out, the absence of a response sent shockwaves of panic through the crew. People rushed to his side, and when they flipped him over, the horror became clear. Blood, dark and wet, seeped through his shirt. Not fake blood, not a stage effect, but a lethal wound in his abdomen. He had been shot with something real, something deadly. Paramedics were called immediately, and Brandon was rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Hours of emergency surgery followed, with doctors working frantically to stop the internal bleeding. Despite their best efforts, the bullet had caused irreparable damage. Brandon Lee was pronounced dead at 1:03 p.m. on March 31, 1993, at the age of 28. The production crew, stunned and paralyzed by disbelief, struggled to comprehend the scale of the tragedy. Accidents happen on film sets, but never like this. Not when the prop gun was supposed to contain only blanks, designed to mimic the noise and flash of a real firearm without launching a projectile. Somehow, all the safeguards had failed catastrophically. Michael Massey, the actor who had pulled the trigger, was immediately overwhelmed by guilt and horror. He later described the incident as the night that robbed him of his innocence. For years, he avoided discussing the event, retreating from the spotlight, haunted by the role he had played in the death of a colleague and friend. Headlines erupted. Across the globe, Brandon Lee slain on set, actor dies in freak accident, capturing public attention and speculation alike. Yet the broader narrative contained shadows the headlines could not capture. How could a professional production, staffed by trained personnel, allow such a preventable catastrophe? Who was ultimately responsible for the weapon, and what had gone so disastrously wrong? Initial reports were vague, hinting at misfires or fragments of debris. But the autopsy revealed the unthinkable. A full .44 caliber slug had been extracted from Brandon's body. This was no freak accident. It was a lethal and avoidable mistake. Long. Before Brandon collapsed, whispers of a curse had begun to circulate around the set of The Crow. From the very first days of production, the atmosphere was tense, punctuated by bizarre mishaps. A carpenter was horrifically burned when a piece of equipment he was working on contacted live wires, and on the same day, 2 other crew members suffered unrelated injuries. Equipment failed repeatedly, storms damaged the outdoor set, and actors endured minor but accumulating injuries. Initially, the cast and crew laughed off the incidents, jokingly dubbing the situation the Curse of the Crow. But the laughter was undercut by a growing sense of unease. Even seasoned professionals, accustomed to on-set dangers, began to feel that something was amiss. The working conditions did little to alleviate the stress. Long, grueling days, often 18 hours or more, combined with punishing deadlines, created exhaustion that blurred judgment and compromised safety. Corners were cut, and protocols became lax. Actors and crew assumed that after numerous close calls, the worst was behind them. But they could not have been more wrong. The story itself mirrored this dark environment. The Crow told the story of a man and his betrothed who are slain only to rise from the grave to exact revenge. The gothic, violent tale seemed almost to presage the very tragedy that would strike its lead actor. Julianne Gary, an Entertainment Weekly journalist covering the production, spoke of a persistent thread of fear and unease among those on set, noting that nothing seemed to go right and a shadow hung over the project as filming continued. The fatal scene itself was deceptively simple. Brandon walking through a doorway carrying groceries, getting shot, and collapsing. No stunts, no fire, no explosions. Yet this ordinary scene became the most tragic moment in the production, a moment that would overshadow every other event on the set. Many later reflected on the supposed inevitability of the tragedy, pondering whether the Crow had been doomed from the start. Supernatural interpretations arose, some pointing to the dark themes of the script as if the story itself had invited misfortune. Others noted Brandon's own proximity to death, having lost his father, Bruce Lee, at a young age under similarly enigmatic circumstances. Crew members who spoke anonymously recalled a pervasive sense of unease. People have tried to say it was haunted. I don't know about that, but there were definitely bad vibes on the set. The truth about the gun revealed something far more horrifying than any curse. Investigators soon focused on the central question: how did a real bullet end up in a movie prop gun? This was not a misfired blank or a stunt gone wrong. The autopsy confirmed that a live .44 caliber bullet had struck Brandon, demonstrating a catastrophic failure in the chain of safety on set. The revolver used was a Smith & Wesson Model 629-44 Magnum. In Hollywood, real guns are often modified to fire blanks, creating the sound and flash of real gunfire without propelling a projectile. But in this case, disaster struck. Earlier in production, the same revolver had been used in a close-up scene requiring the appearance of being loaded. Dummy rounds were used, cartridges without powder intended to look like bullets. However, the props team made a critical error. While the gunpowder was removed, the primers were left intact. In real bullets, the primer ignites the powder. Even alone, it carries a small explosive charge. During the earlier close-up, dry firing the gun caused a primer to discharge just enough to push a bullet into the barrel, creating a squib load, a hidden, dangerous projectile. This lodged bullet went unnoticed, sitting silently, awaiting its fatal roll. Days later, as the crew prepared for Brandon's scene, dummy cartridges were removed and blanks loaded. When Massey fired, the blank's force drove the bullet already, stuck in the barrel directly into Brandon's abdomen. with lethal consequences. It was a horrifying confluence of human error, oversight, and tragic coincidence. Brandon's death reverberated far beyond the studio. It became a cautionary tale about negligence, fatigue, and the thin line between reality and performance. The symbolic echoes of his role, the resurrected Eric Draven, added a haunting dimension, as if the fictional narrative had bled into real life. Brandon's proximity to death, his father's early passing, and the relentless pressures of the Yew production created a narrative that Hollywood would never forget. The tragedy also sparked debates about safety regulations on film sets, the use of real firearms, and the responsibility of crew members to prevent avoidable disasters. Even decades later, Brandon Lee's death remains shrouded in fascination, speculation, and dark reverence. The Crow is forever linked to his name, a reminder of both artistic ambition and mortal vulnerability. Rumors of curses persist, though. The truth, meticulously uncovered by investigators, paints a starkly human story of mistakes and oversight, a chain of small errors culminating in an irreversible loss. Brandon Lee's story is a chilling testament to the fragility of life on film sets, the seductive allure of realism in cinema, and the profound, lingering impact of a young talent taken too soon. In the end, Brandon Lee was more than a victim of a freak accident. He became a symbol of the dangers lurking behind the glamour of Hollywood, the fragile line between performance and reality, and the tragic consequences of negligence. His death serves as a stark reminder that even in a world of make-believe, the rules of life and death cannot be ignored. And as audiences continue to watch The Crow, the shadow of Brandon Lee's presence remains, haunting and eternal, a legacy born of talent, tragedy, and the cruel misfortune of a prop gun gone wrong. After the immediate shock of Brandon Lee's death subsided, the world of Hollywood was left reeling. What had been intended as a routine scene, one of the countless meticulously choreographed moments in The Crow, had spiraled into a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. Investigators arrived on set almost immediately, tasked with piecing together the sequence of events that led to the fatal shooting. Every detail was scrutinized. The props used, the handling of firearms, the supervision of the scene, and the chain of command responsible for safety. The initial finding that a live .44 caliber bullet had struck Brandon left experts and authorities stunned. It was clear that this was not a mere accident in the conventional sense. Somewhere along the production line, multiple failures had converged to create a lethal outcome. A critical aspect of the investigation revealed the deadly mechanics behind the gun. The Smith & Wesson Model 629 revolver, originally modified to fire blanks for cinematic effect, had been loaded incorrectly during earlier scenes. Dummy rounds, designed to look like bullets without the capacity to fire, had their primers left intact. During a previous close-up, dry firing the weapon caused a primer to detonate just enough to push a bullet into the barrel, a condition known as a squib load. No one noticed. Days later, blanks were loaded for Brandon's scene, unknowingly forcing the stuck bullet out at high velocity. This convergence of human error, oversight, and ignorance turned an otherwise routine prop into a weapon of fatal consequence. While investigators painstakingly reconstructed the scene, the human toll became increasingly apparent. Michael Massey, the actor who had pulled the trigger, was psychologically devastated. Though he had done nothing intentionally, the weight of Brandon's death was inescapable. Massey withdrew from acting for an extended period, haunted by guilt and terror. Interviews later revealed the depth of his trauma. He described the incident as a night that robbed him of innocence, a moment permanently seared into his memory. The broader Hollywood community also felt the impact. Cast and crew members who had shared the set with Brandon were left grappling with grief and shock. Safety practices across the industry were scrutinized, and the questions that lingered, how this could have happened, who was responsible, and what preventive measures had failed, stirred debates about accountability on film sets. As the news Spread, the media frenzy was relentless. Tabloids and mainstream outlets alike speculated on the circumstances, sometimes with morbid fascination. Stories of a curse haunting the set proliferated, fueled by the long history of mishaps, injuries, and accidents that had plagued production. Observers drew dark parallels between Brandon's death and that of his father, Bruce Lee, whose own passing had been shrouded in mystery and premature loss. Fans and journalists alike pored over every detail, connecting dots between superstition, coincidence, and tragedy. Some claimed supernatural intervention, others pointed to the symbolic resonance of the Crow's story, a narrative about death, revenge, and resurrection as eerily reflective of real life. The lines between myth and reality blurred, cementing Brandon Lee's death in public imagination as both horrific and enigmatic. The symbolism of the Crow itself deepened the sense of haunting inevitability. Eric Draven, Brandon's character, rises from the grave to avenge his own murder and the death of his betrothed. The gothic, violent narrative mirrored the actor's fate in ways that many found chilling. Audiences, and even those on set, could not help but note the poetic, almost prophetic resonance. The fictional resurrection, juxtaposed with the real-life tragedy of Brandon's untimely death, created a layer of mythos that has persisted for decades. In some ways, the story of the Crow and its making became inseparable from Brandon's life and death, a grim testament to the collision of art and reality. Beyond symbolism, Brandon Lee's death instigated tangible changes in Hollywood. Production. Houses began re-evaluating safety protocols for firearms and stunts. Detailed checks, inspections, and accountability measures became mandatory, ensuring that such a preventable tragedy would not be repeated. Prop masters, stunt coordinators, and directors were reminded that even the most mundane scenes could carry hidden dangers. Brandon's death served as a cautionary tale, highlighting the precarious balance between cinematic authenticity and human safety. Industry-wide, the reverberations prompted a more cautious approach to stunts and prop weapon handling, ensuring that the lessons learned from the Crow's set would resonate for generations of filmmakers. Yet the human story remained at the heart of the tragedy. Fans, colleagues, and admirers mourned Brandon Lee, not only as a rising star lost too soon, but as a symbol of potential cut short. His work, his charisma, and his promise lingered in the cultural consciousness. Documentaries, retrospectives, and film enthusiasts revisiting The Crow often noted the eerie parallels between the film's themes and Brandon's own demise. The fascination, the speculation, and the reverence combined to cement his legacy in a way few actors experience. Even decades later, Brandon Lee's name evokes the mingling of talent, tragedy, and the dark mystique of the cinematic world he inhabited. Ultimately, Brandon Lee's story is more than a tale of a fatal accident. It is a narrative about human error, the fragility of life, and the haunting intersection of reality and fiction. The bullet that struck him was the result of misjudgment and oversight, yet the mythos surrounding his death has transformed it into a cultural phenomenon. His life and career, though tragically abbreviated, continue to captivate audiences, filmmakers, and fans worldwide. The shadow of Brandon Lee endures, a permanent reminder that even in the world of make-believe, the consequences of a single mistake can echo through time. His memory, immortalized in The Crow and in the hearts of those who admired him, is a testament to talent, loss, and the fragile boundary between life and art. Behind the tragic events on the set of The Crow, the IA props department became the focal point of scrutiny. The seemingly minor oversight of leaving primers in dummy rounds revealed a chain of errors that culminated in fatal consequences. In Hollywood, props teams are responsible for creating authenticity while maintaining safety, ensuring that weapons, explosives, and other potentially dangerous objects are handled with extreme care. On The Crow, the Smith & Wesson Model 629 revolver had been used in multiple scenes. Dummy rounds designed purely for visual effect without powder or projectile had been improperly assembled. While the removal of gunpowder was standard, the failure to remove primers, a small but critical explosive component, turned the gun into a lethal trap. Dry firing during earlier scenes caused the primer to discharge just enough to push a bullet into the barrel, creating a squib load, a hidden hazard waiting silently for its next activation. Days later, when blanks were loaded for Brandon's fatal scene, this dormant bullet was forced out at lethal velocity. The props team, though skilled, had not implemented the final verification step, and no one noticed the hidden threat that would end a young life. Crew members later recalled the tense atmosphere that pervaded the set. Long hours, exhausting schedules, and near-constant mishaps had created a sustained undercurrent of unease. Anonymous testimonies described a series of small accidents and malfunctions that, over time, convinced many that something was off on the set. Equipment failures, minor injuries, and the stress of brutal filming hours combined to create a pervasive sense of dread. Veteran crew members spoke of a foreboding energy, a feeling that the production was somehow cursed, though none could pinpoint a specific reason. These accounts highlight the psychological toll on everyone present, working under extreme fatigue, constantly vigilant, yet never fully anticipating the tragedy that awaited. The notion of a curse surrounding the Crow only intensified after Brandon's death. Hollywood is no stranger to superstition, and stories of ill-fated productions are embedded deeply in its folklore. Comparisons were drawn to other notorious on-set accidents, and the dark parallels to Brandon's own father, Bruce Lee, who had died prematurely under mysterious circumstances, fed the narrative. While rational explanations were provided, the mythology around the production grew, entwining real events with the idea of supernatural intervention. Crew members and observers alike could not ignore the eerie poetic coincidence. A film about resurrection and vengeance, claiming the life of its star. As news of Brandon Lee's death spread, the media frenzy was immediate and intense. Headlines blared worldwide, describing the freak accident and sensationalizing the tragedy. Fans and journalists speculated endlessly, dissecting every angle of the story. Some were drawn to conspiracy theories, suggesting a hidden curse or mysterious fate, while others focused on the parallels between Brandon and Bruce Lee. The combination of superstition, tragedy, and the visual impact of a prop gun gone wrong created a cultural storm, cementing Brandon's death in public consciousness as both shocking and almost mythic. Over time, even online communities and fan forums contributed to the lore, weaving fact and speculation into a compelling, dark narrative that persists to this day. Despite the tragedy, the Crow itself became a cultural phenomenon, inextricably linked to Brandon Lee's life and death. The film's gothic, stylized depiction of revenge, resurrection, and moral justice resonated powerfully with audiences, now layered with the haunting context of the actor's demise. Eric Draven's journey from death to vengeance mirrored, in an unsettling way, Brandon's own fate, giving the film a chilling meta-narrative. Fans interpreted the movie as more than entertainment. It became a memorial to talent lost too soon, a celebration of his artistry, and a haunting reminder of mortality. The visual aesthetic, combined with the real-life tragedy, amplified the film's impact, ensuring its lasting influence in cinematic and pop culture history. The repercussions of Brandon Lee's death extended beyond myth and media into tangible changes within Hollywood. Safety protocols, particularly regarding firearms and stunts, were re-examined across the industry. Productions implemented stricter verification procedures for props, double-checking weapons, dummy rounds, and blanks. Stunt coordinators and directors were reminded that even seemingly innocuous scenes could carry hidden dangers. These reforms, born from tragedy, saved countless lives in the years that followed, ensuring that Brandon Lee's death would not be in vain. It became a case study in accountability, oversight, and the necessity of rigorous safety practices in filmmaking. Ultimately, Brandon Lee's story is both tragic and enduring. Fans, colleagues, and audiences worldwide continue to honor his memory, recognizing the immense potential and promise that was taken too soon. His death, while rooted in human error, has become entwined with myth, cinematic history, and cultural fascination. Documentaries, retrospectives, and analyses of The Crow frequently revisit the accident, emphasizing its lessons while also preserving the reverence due to Brandon's talent. His legacy exists not only in the film he left behind, but also in the enduring discussions about safety, superstition, and the fragile boundary between art and reality. Brandon Lee's life and career, though tragically abbreviated, continue to captivate the imagination. The shadow of that fateful prop gun looms in cinematic history, a reminder of how a single misstep can reverberate far beyond a single set. His story embodies talent, loss, and caution, highlighting the human cost behind Hollywood's pursuit of realism. The Crow remains immortal, a Gothic testament to Brandon Lee's artistry and the haunting circumstances of his passing. Decades later, audiences still feel the weight of his absence, and the narrative of that dark spring day in 1993 endures as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the enduring impact of a young star lost too soon. The sudden and tragic death of Brandon Lee on the set of The Crow left a profound psychological impact on everyone involved in the production. Cast members described a pervasive sense of fear and anxiety which lingered long after the fatal day. Sleepless nights became common as actors and crew struggled to reconcile the surreal nature of the accident with the reality of their environment. Every door, every prop, every weapon on set carried an invisible weight of dread. The psychological scars were not limited to the immediate aftermath. For weeks, the cast questioned the safety of each subsequent scene, navigating rehearsals and shoots with heightened tension. Fear had become an uninvited companion, subtly influencing performances and decisions, and leaving an indelible mark on those who were present. From the director's perspective, Alex Proyas faced an unimaginable challenge. As the leader of the production, he was tasked not only with finishing the film, but also with managing a grieving cast and crew, while grappling with his own feelings of guilt and responsibility. The pressure to complete the movie while honoring Brandon's memory created an emotional burden that weighed heavily on him. Decisions that might otherwise have seemed routine were now fraught with moral and ethical considerations. Proyas's reflections on that period reveal a director forced to balance the creative demands of a blockbuster with the human cost of tragedy, highlighting the complex responsibilities leaders bear in high-stakes environments. Stunt coordinators and on-set safety experts, too, faced a moment of reckoning. The accident underscored the critical importance of rigorous safety protocols, and the gaps that had allowed the fatal mishap to occur became a source of intense scrutiny. Coordinators revisited every sequence, every firearm, and every stunt with newfound vigilance. Procedures that had previously been considered sufficient were reassessed in light of the accident, and the industry began to adopt a culture of zero tolerance for oversight in potentially dangerous situations. The tragedy became a case study, illustrating how one overlooked detail could have catastrophic consequences. Fans around the world reacted with shock, grief, and admiration. Brandon Lee's untimely death elevated The Crow from a Gothic action film to a cultural phenomenon. Tributes, memorials, and fan gatherings celebrated his life and his talent, while simultaneously mourning the life that had been tragically cut short. The Gothic themes of resurrection and vengeance resonated even more deeply in light of his passing, creating a unique bond between the audience and the story. Over time, the film developed a devoted cult following, its legacy intertwined with the memory of its lost star. Years later, documentaries and retrospectives revisited the tragedy, offering new interviews, behind-the-scenes insights, and expert analysis. These revisitations provided a more complete understanding of the accident while exploring the enduring fascination surrounding it. Experts analyzed the technical aspects of the prop gun, the mishandling of dummy rounds, and the sequence of human errors that led to Brandon's death. Journalists and filmmakers alike reflected on the cultural impact, emphasizing not only the lessons learned but also the mythos that had grown around the production. The narrative of a curse continued to circulate, blending superstition with fact. Some compared The Crow to other infamous productions with on-set accidents, noting eerie coincidences and symbolic parallels. While the supernatural angle remained speculative, it underscored the psychological need for explanation. In the face of tragedy, the myth of the curse became a part of Hollywood lore, entwined with Brandon's story and the dark aura of the film itself, a narrative as compelling as the movie on screen. In response to the tragedy, the modern film industry began implementing far-reaching reforms. Safety standards for firearms, stunts, and special effects were tightened. Technological advancements, such as digital effects, allowed filmmakers to replicate dangerous sequences without risking human life. Prop guns were increasingly replaced with safer alternatives, and risk assessment became a cornerstone of production planning. The lessons learned from Brandon Lee's death reshaped Hollywood practices, ensuring that his loss would leave a lasting, preventive legacy. Brandon Lee's life and career, though tragically short, continue to resonate across generations. He remains a symbol of talent, potential, and the inherent risks of filmmaking. The Crow, forever linked to his name, stands as both a tribute and a cautionary tale, a Gothic monument to artistry, tragedy, and the delicate balance between performance and reality. Audiences, filmmakers, and fans alike continue to remember him, not merely for the accident that ended his life,